Man, what an exciting time to be a football fan. There's so much going on in the NFL right now. Let's get you updated on the latest. Hi, hello, and welcome in to the Ball Don't Lie podcast, episode number 176. My name's Austin Elmore, and we've gone back to back. That's right, back to back days with a podcast for the first time since Bengals training camp back in July. And that's because there's a lot to talk about. First of all, let me tell you, congratulations. You've made it through stage one of the NFL offseason. So here's how I put the stages of the NFL offseason. Stage one is from the Super Bowl to the scouting combine. After that game, up until the scouting combine, that's stage one. Then from the scouting combine until free agency in the new league year, that's stage two of the combine. From free agency until the draft, that's stage three. From the draft until OTAs, that's stage four. And from OTAs until training camp, that's stage five. We have completed stage number one of the NFL offseason. There is a lot to get to. A lot has happened, especially around the Bengals today. I'll tell you about that in just a moment. Here's how the show is going to go. It's going to be a little bit shorter than it was yesterday, just to try to cram all this information in. You will hear from the head coach of the Bengals, Zac Taylor, at the end of this episode. Three things he said at the podium at the combine, and one thing he said about play calling. Yes, play calling got brought up again at the scouting combine. I'll tell you about that and why it may or may not be a big deal. Let's start with, what did we learn? What happened at the scouting combine today? Well, let me reference the schedule. I should say what happened yesterday, because today is Thursday. As I'm recording this, it's Wednesday night. So what happened Wednesday at the NFL scouting combine? Well, that was when the kickers actually did their on-field workouts. So technically the first on-field workouts happened Wednesday. The rest of the on-field workouts begin today, Thursday, February the 26th. So place kickers, defensive linemen, and linebackers, they had their orthopedic exams, media interviews, the NFLPA meetings, and the team interviews, which means a lot of those players met with the Bengals yesterday. We'll give you a list of those guys when we finish up with this right here. So today, for that group of players, Thursday is going to be measurements in the on-field workout for the defensive linemen and the linebackers. Meanwhile, today, the media interviews, the NFLPA meeting, the team interviews are going to be happening for the defensive backs and tight ends, and the team interviews, general medical exams, and others are going to be happening for the quarterbacks, wide receivers, and running backs. Offensive linemen are just now getting into town and doing all their pre-exam and stuff like that. So on-field workouts at the NFL Scouting Combine officially begin today. It's a big deal. Now, it's also a big deal that, according to Todd McShay, one of the top prospects, not only in the draft itself, but for the Bengals specifically, is not going to be participating in those workouts. Reuben Bain Jr., the edge rusher out of Miami, according to Todd McShay, is not going to participate in the on-field drills, the on-field workouts for the NFL Scouting Combine. I don't think that's a huge deal. His measurables speak for himself. He just had an extended season in which he played in the College Football Playoff National Championship game for Miami. He's probably letting his body rest. His tape speaks for itself. One of the issues with Reuben Bain Jr., according to a lot of scouts, whether or not it's a big deal, I don't know. I don't think so, is his arm length. That could be a reason why he's more successful on the inside when rushing the passer, less successful on the outside. Either way, you just look at this guy's tape and you know he's a game wrecker, not somebody that you want to get in the way of when it comes to a defensive lineman. Let's check out what else is going on when it comes to the Bengals. There's a list of guys, those defensive linemen and linebackers that have met with the Bengals. I'm going to bring you that list in just a second. I do want to finish off with one more quote about Reuben Bain. Okay. So Reuben Bain did confirm that he met with the Bengals. And when he was meeting with the media earlier today, he talked about how, I love football. I eat, sleep, and breathe football. I have no hobbies. That's the type of guy you want. And when you heard Duke Tobin yesterday talk about we want guys that love football, Zac Taylor said, we want guys that love football. We want that to be their top priority. Everything else to fall in the line after that. That's the type of stuff you're talking about. Even to the point where Reuben Bain Jr. doesn't have a nice haircut, doesn't get lined up, is not fresh, doesn't have a good cut. He kind of looks a little disheveled to an extent. I think he kind of looks like Will Smith's character in God, what's that movie where he's trying to sell those devices? You know what I'm saying? You know that movie? I referenced that earlier. Um, I'll think of it later. Anyways, I think that's kind of what Reuben Bain Jr. looks like. That's the type of guy the Bengals are going for. I think a lot of Bengals fans would be thrilled if the Bengals were able to find a way to land Reuben Bain Jr. Here's the list of who else has met with the Bengals so far. Reuben Bain Jr., obviously, and again, he's not working out at the combine today. Dante Corleone, big defensive tackle from the University of Cincinnati. David Bailey, the top flight edge rusher from Texas Tech. He's expected to go in the top 10 as well. He met with the Bengals. Sonny Styles, the linebacker out of Ohio State. Peter Woods, the defensive tackle from Clemson. And Caden McDonald, the defensive tackle from Ohio State. Now, Peter Woods is going to be my guy to keep a lookout for because I think this is a dude that I just feel like this is going to be a big week for him in the evaluation of him as a player and as a character. We'll talk more about that coming up in just a little bit. But those guys have met with the Bengals. I don't think any of that is breaking news. I don't think any of that is significant. I don't think any of that is a surprise. These guys met with a lot of different teams. I read that Peter Woods was meeting with 21 of the 32 teams, which goes to show how much people are interested in the defensive tackle position. I said it on the air earlier today. I've said it on this podcast. If you held a weapon to my head right now and said, what position are the Bengals going to take at number 10 in the NFL draft? I would tell you defensive tackle. The main reason for that is because there are not a lot of free agent defensive tackles out there. This is a top heavy class of defensive tackles where after the first 3 or 4, it thins out really, really quick. That's a position of need. That's also a spot in the draft where I think 10 is a little bit of a reach for a defensive tackle. But keep in mind, 2 months ago, Peter Woods was a guy that the people had going in the top 10, going in the top 7. So maybe that pendulum swings back around. The Bengals end up taking a guy like Peter Woods, a defensive tackle, at number 10 because it's a need, because it could be best player available, and because the depth of the free agent class is not something that they'll be able to address. They might feel better about drafting a defensive tackle if they've signed an edge rusher, if they've signed a safety, if they've signed a corner, if they've taken care of those other needs in free agency. Maybe that provides them a little bit more wiggle room to go after the defensive tackle. Now, I think they should go after best player available, and I've said that many times, but in this particular case, I think it's noteworthy that could end up happening. So that was the big news as far as the Bengals were concerned at the combine today. There was a couple of other pieces of news in the NFL. One of them was that teams have started calling the Carolina Panthers for quarterback Andy Dalton. Andy's about to go into his 15th season in the National Football League, which is hard to believe. Him coming in 2011 when A.J. Green was a rookie with that Bengals team. But Andy Dalton, I think, is a guy who makes a lot of sense as a potential backup to Joe Burrow. You might think that's crazy, but I mean, he might cost you right around the same or a little bit less than what Joe Flacco cost you. There's familiarity there with Zac Taylor and with the Bengals. It could be a full circle moment for Andy Dalton. I think that makes a lot of sense, quite honestly, for Andy Dalton to be the guy. And Zac Taylor said they love Joe Flacco. They would love to have Joe Flacco back, but they've got to do their research. They've got to do their homework, and they will be adding to the quarterback room for the Bengals. Right now, it's Joe Burrow, Jake Browning, and Sean Clifford as the quarterbacks for the Bengals at the moment. And while Sean Clifford is really doing some interesting stuff on social media, don't know that you feel comfortable with him being the backup quarterback as of right now. The other thing was that Tremaine Edmonds, the good linebacker from the Chicago Bears, has been given permission from the Bears to seek a trade. He's a cap casualty, or it looks like it's going to be a cap cut for the Chicago Bears with Tremaine Edmonds. That's another guy that would make sense for the Bengals in their search for a veteran linebacker and a productive linebacker. But the Bengals really, really value draft picks. We heard this yesterday from Duke Tobin. He kept referring to fourth round draft picks as guys like Geno Atkins, which to me kind of peeled the curtain back, peeled that layer of the onion to really show you how the Bengals think and how the Bengals view and how the Bengals value draft picks. Draft picks are currency, but for the Bengals, they view every fourth round pick they have as the next Geno Atkins. And if you view every fourth round pick you have as the next Geno Atkins, you're never going to give it up. Geno's going to be in Canton one day as a Hall of Fame defensive tackle. He's one of the best players that's ever played for this franchise. If that's how you view every fourth round pick, you're never going to trade the picks. And I think that would be overvaluing it. And I think they need to be more open minded to using those picks as currency and being willing to trade them to get an asset that is a really good player. I'm concerned a little bit about that part. I think that's one of the evolutions that the Bengals need to be better at. I think Duke Tobin needs to be better at. Those are the other two interesting pieces of news. Also, Derek Carr, very serious about potentially returning from retirement. He dealt with a shoulder injury last couple of years he had been with the Raiders and with the Saints. He dealt with a shoulder injury, was out of football this past year. Derek Carr, it seems, interested in a return to the National Football League. All right, let's get to Zac Taylor. The Bengals head coach was on the podium on Tuesday. Didn't have a lot to say. Didn't feel like I got a ton out of listening to Zac Taylor, to be completely honest. But I'm curious about their process. I'm curious about how much further along they've come. I'm curious about what he's willing to adapt to and how he's willing to change. And so we got a few answers kind of along those lines when it comes to Zac Taylor. The first is, how much further along in the process are the Bengals this year than they were at this time a year ago? Take a listen.
I do. I think especially when you look at our defensive staff, light years ahead of where we were last year. We were talking scheme every day and trying to get up to speed on who our current players are, because a lot of these guys were obviously hadn't been here. We just hired them, and so now we've immediately we didn't take a very long vacation. We were back in the office very quickly for the reason of being on top of free agency and the draft process, so that we can get all the information, all of our thoughts and feelings on players to Duke and his staff, and so now we can coexist together and formulate the best opinions for our team. And so I feel I didn't exactly hear what Duke said, but I know we are so much further along in this process. That's maybe the worst way to put it, but just we're in a very confident place right now as coaches. They always do their work ahead of schedule, but we're in a great place right now as coaches and can get that information to scouts.
Zac Taylor on where they are at. He's right. Waited a little bit longer to get Al Golden in after the national championship game, build the defensive staff, come up with the scheme. How do the players fit the scheme, and so on. You would hope that there is a little bit smoother of a transition, more guys on the same page, better understanding of the players that you want in order to build the defense, and you would expect that to yield better results this year if you're the Bengals. One of the big issues is free agency and attacking free agency and being able to use the resources like Duke Tobin talked about. Here's what the Bengals head coach, Zac Taylor, had to say about the Bengals process when it comes to free agency and the process of the offseason altogether.
Well, we go in, we get with our scouts and develop our thoughts on needs we might have on both sides of the ball, how they can help us, special teams as well. And then we jump into free agency and we get with, our scouts do a great job getting with these guys during that negotiating process and figuring out what fits for us. And then you're ready to shift if something doesn't work out to another position. It's a fun process to be a part of. There's a lot of work that goes into it. You got to do a lot of work on a lot of players because, again, it's a very quick process that happens very fast that can shift in a moment's notice, and you got to be ready to go get another great player. And so our guys, our scouts and coaches have done a great job with the evaluation process, and I feel like we're in a good spot.
That is Bengals head coach Zac Taylor when it comes to the Bengals offseason process. Not sure that there's a ton of new information there, but a little bit of a peek inside what the Bengals are trying to do. The other thing that's interesting is Zach is constantly being asked about Joe Burrow and what he's learned from Joe Burrow and what he learned about Burrow this year and all the things that you put into the pot from another year of experience with Joe Burrow. He was asked about that again at the Combine on Tuesday. Here's Zac Taylor talking about Joe Burrow.
This is in my genre of favorite questions about things that I learned about Joe every year. I wouldn't say that I learned much about Joe this year. I love going to work side by side with him every single day and trying to execute a plan that can help us win. And he's one of the biggest competitors I've ever been around. And so as many people that you can get like Joe around you, I think is critical. You know, he's a champion. He knows how to win. He's won before. And he wants to do whatever it takes to get back to the top, you know, and let us go win a Super Bowl. So I can't say that I learned anything from Joe this year, but every year we gain experiences side by side with each other that I believe will help us win a championship.
Bengals head coach Zac Taylor on Joe Burrow. Final thing here to kind of wrap up the show in this final little bit. Play calling got brought up again, and it got brought up because Dan Pitcher, the Bengals offensive coordinator, was considering leaving the team so that he could go and be an offensive coordinator somewhere else with the ability to call plays. He doesn't technically call plays for the Bengals. That's what Zac Taylor does. Zac offered some he said he was open to it when it comes to Dan Pitcher. He was asked to clarify those comments when he met with the media in the scrum afterwards. Take a listen to what Zac said about play calling and about their process when it comes to play calling.
I was saying, when you were up on the podium and you were talking about play calling and pitch, you said it was something you'd be open to. What were you referencing?
Him going to be an OC to call plays somewhere else.
Somewhere else.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Okay.
Did that ever has that come up with the idea of maybe Dan calling plays to keep him here, or is that not a bridge?
I think we have a good process. Yeah. People might not believe me when I say that. We got a really good process that we follow. To say that he doesn't call plays just isn't true. Like that should be the TV show, right? Is you actually get to hear a headset for the entirety of a game, and then I think people would say, okay, this is overblown. Clearly, there's communication between every single play and every single series. What's the difference in you saying it and me saying it? Yeah. We're all on the same page, trying to get the same outcome. So, but there obviously is something to going somewhere and being the primary play caller. I understand what all that entails, but he and I coexist really well together. He calls a lot of the plays that we run. They're just coming out of my mouth when I speak to Joe, and so we're on the same page, and I think it's the best process that works well for us.
We can subscribe to that TV show if you want to put it out there. I'm fine.
Get Peyton, I'm sure, but he can do another Peyton show, and that's the next thing is under the headset, maybe under the headset, and he can really go a whole show of coaches talking to coaches and coaches talking to quarterbacks and quarterbacks telling coaches in the huddle, shut up, even though the coach can't hear you. I just want to talk to my guys. So that's the next show.
Do you think that's an advantage to the head man being a guy calling the plays? I mean, you think that's an advantage maybe?
Oh, Jeff. I mean, yes, for us. Right. From a continuity standpoint, yes. Right. Because the scheme doesn't change. Other teams, the head coach doesn't call the plays and the coordinators do it, and they've had a lot of success. Right. So it's just what fits your team, what fits the coaches you have, the players you have. Everywhere's a little bit different. For us, I feel like this is what fits us best.
Bengals head coach Zac Taylor, and I want to start by saying thank you to my guy James Rapine from Cincinnati Bengals Talk for giving us that audio and allowing us to hear that from the audio-only scrum that he had with the local beat writers afterwards. Give James a follow with all of his stuff, Cincinnati Bengals Talk as well, and that's where that audio comes from. Play calling keeps getting brought up. And here's my thing about Zac. I don't think play calling is the biggest issue. I did an episode about this a couple of weeks back in which I said the process needs to be cleaned up. I think there's too many issues in getting the play in on time, deciding on exactly what's going to happen. I worry at times that it maybe is too collaborative, that it's taking too long for decisions to be made, that there's not enough forward thinking. I don't think that's the Bengals' biggest issue, but I do think that overall process can be cleaned up, maybe more streamlined. I also know that Zac Taylor is not somebody who will dig his heels in and be resistant and reluctant to change. He's been willing to change various parts about his tenure as a head coach. He's gone through multiple offensive line coaches, multiple coordinators, multiple position coaches, different run schemes, a gap scheme, this scheme, all sorts of, he's not afraid to change. And I think that's what makes Zac a good head coach. So to me, I think it says a lot if a guy who's very open to and willing to change is not changing this because he doesn't see it as something that needs to be changed. Is there ego at play? Sure, there probably is. Is there a comfort at play? Sure, there probably is. I don't think it's the biggest issue. I do think it can be streamlined and improved upon, and I wish there would have been more pushback on the process. But I also look at it and say, okay, well, if it is as collaborative as you say it is, and if Pitch really is calling plays, well then why isn't that more translatable for him into getting a head coaching job? Why wasn't it as translatable for Brian Callahan to getting a head coaching job sooner? What's the disconnect there that prevents these guys from maybe moving on and having to go and get that? I'm sure there's layers to that. I'm sure it's more nuanced than the conversation we're having right now, but it does make me wonder, is it as collaborative as you say? And Zach says that Dan Pitcher not calling plays is just not true. And if it is as collaborative as you say, could that be a detriment to the efficiency of the offense? Those are the things that I would like a little bit more clarification on. But again, play calling is not the Bengals' biggest issue, and it hasn't been for a while. It can be better, but it's not the biggest thing plaguing this team. All right, let's finish up with our prospect to watch. For me, it's defensive tackle Peter Woods out of Clemson. Peter Woods is 6'3", 310 pounds. He's a junior. He was a monster just a couple of years ago. He had a bit of a slow and a down year. That has caused him to drop off of some draft boards, not off, but down some draft boards. He was playing out of position a little bit at nose tackle, which I don't think is great for him. Lance Zierlein of the NFL Network lists his strengths as a powerful and explosive athlete, lateral quickness, frequently defeats attempted reach blocks, ties hands with feet to slide across blockers' face and into gaps, explodes his hips through initial contact at the point of attack, good feel for finding the seam to split the double team, good anticipation, shed quickness as a two tackle as let me try that one again. Good anticipation and shed quickness to tackle as a two gapper. Sturdy base allowed for more consistent recovery and sets booming picks on blockers in the twist game. That's important. He lists his weaknesses as this: plays lighter, but gives more ground against single blocks, took chances that failed to pay off in the run game, short arms prevent him from keeping blockers out of his frame, average twist quickness to set off a schemed rush, no real primary moves to reliably open an edge. So obviously there's some development here. Overall, the prospect grade on him is a 6.36, which means he's an eventual quality starter or plus starter, according to NFL.com. The other thing is, I think part of the reason why he's dropped down some of these draft boards is wondering whether or not he loves football. And I think that's why there's so much interest in teams across the league in Peter Woods. Does he love football? And if so, what happened last year and where is that narrative coming from? I think it'll be interesting to see how Peter Woods does in the on-field stuff today and whatever he participates in, and also in those interviews. And if by next week and next month and going into the draft, he's back towards the top of those draft boards. That's what I find really interesting. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. If you like what you heard, you can hear me weekdays on ESPN 1530. I co-host Tony Pike's Cincy 360 with Tony Pike. You can listen on the iHeartRadio app. Please follow me on any and all social media at Auty Elmore. That's AutyElmore. Back with another episode next week, fully recapping the combine and all that's going on. We'll talk to you then. In the meantime, have fun, be safe, go Bucks.